Ribeye. The ribeye comes from ribs 6 through 12, and it's actually a composite of 3 different muscles. The large center eye is the longissimus dorsi, the fatty section underneath is the complexus, and that crescent-shaped cap wrapping around the outside, that's the spinalis dorsi. The spinalis is what butchers and chefs argue about in private. It has the most marbling, the most tenderness, and the most flavor of any muscle on a cow. Some high-end butcher shops sell it separately as ribeye cap or butcher's butter. It's widely considered the best-kept secret in beef. The problem is you can't get the cap without destroying the ribeye. To cut it away, you have to break down the entire rib primal. Most butchers don't bother. So it stays hidden inside regular ribeyes, and most people never realize they're eating 2 completely different steaks in one. From a health perspective, ribeye's heavy marbling means higher saturated fat and calories, so portion size matters more than with leaner cuts. Next time you order a ribeye, eat the cap first. You'll understand. Filet mignon. The tenderloin runs along the spine tucked behind the ribs. It's a non-weight-bearing muscle that does almost nothing. The cow barely uses it. That's why it's so tender. No work means no tough connective tissue. But here's the paradox. Flavor comes from fat and movement. The tenderloin has almost no marbling and sits in an area that develops minimal beef flavor. It's mild to the point of being bland. That's why restaurants wrap it in bacon, drench it in béarnaise, or serve it with rich sauces. The filet is a canvas. Without help, it doesn't have much to say. So why does it cost the most? Scarcity. After trimming away the silver skin and connective tissue, the usable yield from a single tenderloin is less than 1% of the animal's total weight. 2 tenderloins per cow, maybe 8 steaks total. Supply and demand does the rest. The National Cattlemen's Beef Association still ranks it the most frequently ordered steak at full-service restaurants. Americans pay a premium for tenderness. Whether that makes sense is a different question. Nutritionally, filet is one of the leanest premium steaks, providing high-quality protein with less fat than most other cuts. New York strip. In 1827, 2 Swiss-Italian brothers named Giovanni and Pietro del Monaco opened a pastry shop in Lower Manhattan. A decade later, in 1837, they expanded into what became America's first fine dining restaurant. Among their signature dishes was a cut from the short loin that they called Del Monaco steak. The restaurant's reputation spread. Visitors from across the country associated the cut with the city itself. The same steak goes by at least 8 other names: Ambassador Steak, Club Steak, Kansas City Strip, Hotel-Style Steak, but the Del Monaco connection made New York stick. The Kansas City version has its own history. In the 1800s, Kansas City was the largest stockyard in the country. Western butchers knew this cut before New York chefs ever touched it. Some argue the KC strip came first, with the bones still attached. When Del Monaco started serving it boneless, the New York distinction was born. Today, butchers still disagree on whether the bone is the defining difference. Some say Kansas City strips are bone-in, New York strips are boneless. Others say it's about the fat cap, or which part of the loin it's cut from. USDA doesn't weigh in. The argument continues. Same muscle, different coasts. Endless debate. In terms of nutrition, strip steak sits between ribeye and filet, offering both substantial protein and moderate fat content. Tomahawk. The tomahawk is a bone-in ribeye with the entire rib bone left attached, anywhere from 5 to 12 inches of Frenched bone extending past the meat. Frenched means the fat and tissue have been scraped clean, leaving a dramatic presentation that looks like a tomahawk axe. The meat is identical to any bone-in ribeye, same marbling, same muscles, same flavor. What you're paying for is the show. Here's the math. A tomahawk typically weighs between 30 and 45 ounces, but a significant portion of that weight is bone you won't eat. At steakhouse prices of $100 or more, a meaningful chunk of that cost goes toward presentation. The bone contributes minimal flavor during cooking, maybe some from the marrow and connective tissue, but nothing that justifies the premium on its own. The tomahawk exists because drama sells. It photographs well. It commands attention when it arrives at the table. Restaurants know that spectacle moves steaks, and nothing says celebration like a steak with a handle. If you don't care about the presentation, order a cowboy steak. It's the same cut with a shorter bone and a more honest price. Because it's essentially a large ribeye, its nutritional profile is rich in protein but also high in fat, often delivered in portions larger than recommended serving sizes. T-bone. A T-bone is a composite steak cut from the short loin. The T-shaped vertebra in the middle separates 2 different muscles, a New York strip on one side and a tenderloin fillet on the other. 1 steak, 2 textures, 2 flavor profiles. The porterhouse is the same cut with one difference, the size of the fillet. According to the USDA Institutional Meat Purchase Specifications, the tenderloin portion must measure at least 1.25 inches wide to qualify as a porterhouse. If it's between 0.5 and 1.25 inches, it's a T-bone. Anything smaller gets sold as a bone in strip steak. This distinction exists because the short loin tapers. Toward the front, the tenderloin narrows. Toward the rear, it thickens. Porterhouses come from the back, where you get more filet for your money. T-bones come from the front, where the strip dominates. USDA Science Code 1173 to porterhouse and 1174 to T-bone. If you want certainty, check the label. Nutritionally, T-bones combine a lean filet portion with a richer strip side, offering both lower fat and higher fat bites in one steak. Hanger steak. The hanger steak comes from the diaphragm, suspended between the rib and the loin. It literally hangs there, attached to the kidney. The French call it onglet. In America, it earned the name butcher's steak because for decades, butchers kept it for themselves instead of putting it in the case. There's only one hanger steak per animal. A 1,200-pound cow yielding 800 pounds of beef produces a single hanger of 16 to 32 ounces. That's rarer than the tenderloin. The muscle does almost no work, so the meat is remarkably tender. But unlike the mild tenderloin, the hanger develops intense beefy flavor. Some describe it as having a slight mineral or liver-like richness. The catch is a thick seam of connective tissue running through the center that has to be removed before cooking. For years, processors considered the trimming too much work for the yield. Now it's a bistro staple. Steak frites in Paris almost always features onglet. American restaurants caught on, and prices rose. But it's still cheaper than premium cuts and delivers flavor that rivals any ribeye. If your butcher has it, buy it. Hanger steak is particularly rich in iron and zinc, minerals essential for oxygen transport and immune support. Flat iron. For most of beef history, the shoulder was grinding meat. The chuck was considered too tough, too full of connective tissue to serve as steak. Then, two meat scientists proved everyone wrong. In 1998, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association funded a muscle profiling study at the University of Nebraska and the University of Florida. Chris Calkins and Dwayne Johnson tested over 5,600 muscle samples from 39 different muscles, measuring tenderness, flavor, and marbling. They found an anomaly in the chuck. The infraspinatus muscle, buried in the shoulder blade, tested as the second most tender muscle on the entire animal. More tender than the strip. More tender than the ribeye. Only the tenderloin beat it. The problem was a thick band of connective tissue running through the center. Cut across the grain in the traditional way, you got tough, gristly meat. But if you butterflied the muscle and removed the sinew, you could extract two flat, uniform steaks. They named it the flat iron, after its resemblance to an old-fashioned clothes iron. The cut officially hit the market in 2002. Within 2 years, flat iron sales exceeded T-bone and porterhouse combined in food service. The discovery added an estimated $50 to $70 of value per carcass, billions in additional revenue for the beef industry over time. A steak that didn't exist until this century is now in every grocery store. The shoulder had been hiding a filet the whole time. Flat iron offers a balance of tenderness and moderate fat, making it flavorful while still slightly leaner than ribeye. Skirt versus flank. These are the two main flat steaks people confuse. They look similar, long, thin, heavily grained, but they come from different places and behave differently on the grill. Skirt steak comes from the diaphragm, the same region as the hanger. There are actually two skirt steaks per animal, the outside skirt and the inside skirt. The outside skirt is thicker, more tender, and harder to find because most of it goes to restaurants. The inside skirt is what you'll find at the grocery store. Flank steak comes from the abdominal muscles, lower on the animal. It's leaner than skirt, with a tighter grain and less fat. It's also tougher. The belly works constantly. For fajitas, the traditional choice is skirt. The loose grain absorbs marinades and the higher fat content keeps it juicy. For London broil or stir fry, flank works better sliced thin against the grain. Both require high heat and fast cooking. Go past medium and they turn to shoe leather. Flank is generally the leaner option, while skirt provides more flavor from its higher fat content. Wagyu. Wagyu means Japanese cow. It refers to 4 specific breeds, with Japanese black being the most prized for its genetic predisposition to intense marbling. The fat distributes in fine, lace-like patterns throughout the muscle, not just around the edges but woven through every fiber. Kobe beef is a subset of Wagyu. To qualify as authentic Kobe, the animal must be a Tajima strain Japanese black. Born and raised in Hyogo Prefecture, processed at specific slaughterhouses, and graded A4 or A5 by the Japanese Meat Grading Association. Only about 4,000 cattle qualify worldwide each year. Each cut receives a 10-digit identification number for traceability. If you've eaten Kobe at an American steakhouse, it almost certainly wasn't real. Before 2012, no authentic Kobe beef was legally imported into the United States at all. Even now, the volume is tiny. A few restaurants, a handful of specialty retailers. What you're usually eating is American Wagyu, crossbred cattle with some Japanese genetics, raised domestically. It's better than conventional beef, but it's not the same animal. The grading systems aren't comparable either. The highest Usta Prime roughly equals a beef marbling score of 3 to 4 on the Japanese scale, which goes up to 12. Japanese A5 Wagyu requires a minimum BMS of 8. The difference is literal orders of magnitude in intramuscular fat. Usta Prime has modest marbling. A5 Wagyu is almost white with fat, melting at mouth temperature into something that doesn't behave like any steak you've ever had. Real A5 is meant to be eaten in small portions. A 4-ounce serving is rich enough. The experience is incomparable and priced accordingly. Because of its extreme fat content, Wagyu is typically consumed in small portions rather than as a full serving. Dry-aged beef. Dry aging is the process of storing beef in a controlled environment, typically 32 to 38 degrees Fahrenheit with 75 to 85% humidity and constant airflow for anywhere from 21 to 120 days. During this time, two things happen. First, moisture evaporates. At 21 days, a steak loses about 10% of its original weight. At 30 days, roughly 15%. The water seeps out, concentrating the beef flavor and changing the texture, denser, more intense, unmistakably different. Second, enzymes break down muscle tissue. The meat's own enzymes and beneficial molds on the surface tenderize the protein and develop complex flavors often described as nutty, funky, or umami-rich. Some compare well-aged beef to aged cheese or cured meat. The outer layer of dried, sometimes moldy meat gets trimmed away before sale, further reducing yield. That's why dry-aged beef costs significantly more. You're paying for the weight that evaporated and the trim that got discarded. Wet aging is the industry standard beef vacuum sealed in plastic and aged in its own juices. It tenderizes the meat but doesn't develop the concentrated flavor or funky complexity of dry aging. Interestingly, research shows that flavor changes don't really emerge until between 30 and 60 days. At 21 days, the improvements are mostly textural. The real transformation happens later. Not everyone loves dry-aged beef. The intensity can be polarizing. But for those who acquire the taste, it's a different category of steak entirely. Dry aging alters flavor and tenderness but does not significantly change the basic nutritional composition of the beef. If you enjoyed